The sun on the distant planet burned like a red coin in the sky. The colony where humans lived had tall fences, strong lights, and warning signs telling everyone to stay inside the safety zone. Myra was a young girl who never liked being trapped behind walls. She was curious about the land outside, the strange rocks, the glowing plants, and the unknown creatures that moved in the far distance. That morning Myra walked beyond the border even though she knew it was forbidden. She carried a small pack with dried food and water, and she moved carefully so that the guards would not see her. The air outside felt different, lighter, and cooler than inside the colony. The ground was covered with red dust that stuck to her boots, and long shadows stretched across the land as the sun rose higher. Myra followed a trail of broken plants, and soon she heard heavy breathing. She froze and listened. It sounded like several creatures struggling to move. Her heart beat fast, but her curiosity pulled her forward. She climbed over a low ridge and looked down. There in the shallow valley lay a group of alien dragons. They were larger than any animal she had ever seen. Their scales shone in shades of deep red and copper. Their wings were folded tightly against their bodies, and their tails curled around them. Myra could see that many of them were wounded. One dragon limped and dragged a wing across the ground. Another had a cut on its side that looked painful. Even the smallest of them, no bigger than a horse, seemed too weak to stand. Myra had heard the adults in the colony talk about the red dragons. They were described as dangerous, fierce, and wild. Soldiers often went out in search of them. Yet the sight before her was not of monsters. These creatures looked tired, hungry, and broken. For a long moment Myra stood still, unsure of what to do. The dragons noticed her. Their eyes glowed like burning coals, and they lifted their heads slowly. A deep growl rumbled through the valley. Myra knew she could run back to the colony and call for help, but she also knew what help would mean. Soldiers would come with weapons, and these wounded creatures would never survive. Her hands shook, but Myra did not run. Instead she reached into her pack and pulled out a piece of dried bread. Slowly, she held it up so the dragons could see. She took a step forward, her boots sinking into the red dust. The largest dragon hissed, spreading its wings just a little, but it did not attack. Myra placed the bread on a flat rock and stepped back. The smallest dragon, the one that limped, moved forward first. It sniffed the bread, its hot breath rolling over the rock. Then, to Myra's surprise, it ate the food. Its teeth crushed the bread with ease, but it did not try to harm her. Encouraged, Myra placed more food on the ground. She also took off her coat and laid it gently over the back of the dragon with the cut, as if the cloth could give comfort. She knew it was a small act, but it was all she had. The dragon blinked slowly at her, and the fire in its eyes softened. For the first time in her life, Myra felt that she was standing before something ancient and wise. The dragons were not mindless beasts. They watched her closely, judging her actions, deciding whether she was friend or foe. Myra stood tall even though she was scared. Her heart told her that kindness was stronger than fear. The red sun moved higher, and shadows shifted across the valley. Myra sat on a rock a short distance away, her pack nearly empty now. The dragons rested, still keeping their eyes on her but no longer growling. The silence between them felt strange, like an agreement had been made without words. Myra thought of her colony. If the guards knew what she was doing, they would punish her. They would say she was foolish for feeding dangerous creatures. Yet as she looked at the dragons, she felt no regret. Something inside told her this meeting was important, that her choice to stay would change not only her life but perhaps the future of the entire colony. When the wind picked up, Myra shivered without her coat. The dragon she had covered shifted slightly, adjusting its injured side. It let out a low sound, not a growl but a softer note, almost like a sigh. Myra listened carefully. She wondered if it was trying to speak in its own way, to thank her or to warn her. Night would come soon, and she knew she could not stay in the valley forever. But as she looked at the dragons again, Myra promised herself she would return. She could not abandon them, not after what she had seen. With slow steps, Myra turned back toward the colony walls. Behind her, the pack of red dragons lifted their heads and watched her go. They did not chase. They did not attack. They simply watched the small human girl who had chosen kindness over fear. Myra's heart was full of questions, but one truth was clear. The dragons were not the monsters her people believed. Something deeper connected them, something waiting to be discovered. Myra could not sleep that night. She lay on her small bed inside the colony, staring at the ceiling, her thoughts spinning like a storm. The memory of the wounded red dragons would not leave her. She remembered their glowing eyes, their heavy breathing, and the way the smallest one had eaten the bread from the rock. Her heart told her she had done the right thing, yet fear pressed against her mind. What if the guards discovered her secret? What if the dragons followed her into the colony? Before dawn, Myra rose quietly, slipped her pack over her shoulders, and left her room without a sound. She carried more food this time. Her steps echoed softly against the metal floor of the colony's hallways. At the main gate, she hid behind a storage crate until the guards passed by. Then she slipped out, her small figure vanishing into the dusty morning light. The land outside was quiet, almost too quiet. The red sun climbed slowly into the sky, and the wind carried fine dust across the plains. Myra walked quickly, her boots crunching on the dry ground. When she reached the ridge, she paused. She feared the dragons might be gone, or worse, that soldiers might have found them during the night. She climbed carefully and looked down into the valley. The dragons were still there. They rested close together, their wings folded, their tails coiled like ropes. Some lifted their heads as she appeared, their eyes glowing softly in the morning light. Myra felt relief wash over her. She stepped down into the valley, keeping her movements slow and calm. This time she did not place the food on the rock and walk away. Instead, she crouched a little closer, her hands steady though her heart raced. She placed the food in front of her, keeping her palm open so the dragons could see she carried no weapon. The smallest dragon, the limping one from yesterday, moved forward again. It sniffed her hand, its breath hot and heavy. Myra's body wanted to tremble, but she held still. Slowly, the dragon took the food from her hand. Its teeth brushed against her fingers, but it did not bite. Myra smiled, though her eyes burned with tears she could not explain. She had never felt so close to another living creature before. She whispered softly, though she knew the dragons could not understand her words. "You are not monsters. You are just hurt. I will help you." The larger dragons watched closely. One of them, with scales darker than the rest, lowered its head to the ground and released a slow growl. Myra froze, unsure if it was anger or warning. But then the sound changed. It was lower, calmer, almost like the hum of distant thunder. She realized it was not threatening her. It was testing her. Myra stood tall, her small figure brave against the massive forms before her. She took off her scarf and dipped it into her water flask. Then she walked to the dragon with the deep cut on its side. Her steps were careful, and her eyes stayed on the creature's face. The dragon narrowed its eyes but did not strike. Myra pressed the wet cloth gently against the wound. The dragon flinched, a sharp hiss escaping its throat, but it did not push her away. She continued, dabbing the wound again and again, trying to clean the dried blood and dust. For a long moment there was silence. The other dragons shifted but did not move closer. Then the wounded dragon released a long breath. Its eyelids dropped halfway, as if it had accepted her touch. Myra knew then that she had crossed a line few humans would dare to cross. She had cared for a dragon as if it were a friend. The sun rose higher, and the valley grew warmer. Myra sat down near the dragons, her pack now empty. She had nothing left to give them, but they did not chase her away. Instead, the limping dragon came closer and lay down a few steps from her. Its body stretched across the dust, its head resting near her feet. She reached out and touched the smooth scales of its jaw. The skin was warm, pulsing with life. For the first time, she felt safe beside them. Hours passed before Myra returned to the colony. She slipped inside unnoticed, her hands still carrying the smell of dragon scales. She kept silent about her secret, but she could not hide the light in her eyes. Every part of her longed to return. That evening, Myra overheard the guards speaking. They had tracked signs of dragons near the ridge. Plans were already being made to send soldiers the next day. Myra's stomach tightened with fear. She pictured the wounded pack, too weak to escape. They would not survive an attack. She clenched her fists, her courage burning brighter than her fear. She knew what she must do. She would not let her people harm the dragons. She had given them food, she had cared for their wounds, and she had earned their trust. Now it was her turn to protect them. The night grew darker, and the colony lights flickered across the walls. Myra sat by her window, her heart steady. She was only one human girl, small and unarmed. Yet she felt stronger than ever before. Tomorrow the soldiers would march out, but she would be there first. She would stand between the colony and the dragons, no matter the cost. Her choice was made. The first act of courage had already been taken, but greater courage would soon be needed. The morning inside the colony was full of noise. Metal doors opened, soldiers moved in lines, and the sound of weapons being loaded filled the air. Myra stood near the corner of a storage building, her heart beating fast as she watched them prepare. She had overheard their orders the night before, and now it was real. The soldiers were going after the dragons. The leader of the guard, a man named Raran, raised his voice so all could hear. Tracks have been found near the ridge. The creatures are weak, but they are still dangerous. We will move at first light and finish the job before they can threaten the colony. Myra felt cold inside. She wanted to shout that the dragons were not a threat, that they were only trying to survive, but she stayed silent. No one would listen. To the colony, dragons were enemies. To Myra, they were friends who had shown trust. She rushed back to her small room and filled her pack again with food and water. She tied her scarf around her neck and slipped out before the gates opened for the soldiers. She moved quickly across the dusty ground, her boots leaving faint prints that the wind soon covered. The land stretched wide and empty, but Myra's mind was full of urgency. She thought of the limping dragon who had eaten from her hand, of the injured one she had cleaned with her scarf. If she did not warn them, they would all be gone by the time the sun set. At last she reached the ridge. She climbed up and looked down into the valley. Relief washed over her when she saw the dragons still gathered there. Some were resting, others shifting slowly, their wings heavy and weak. They looked peaceful, unaware of the danger moving toward them. Myra slid down into the valley. The dragons lifted their heads at her approach. She hurried forward, waving her arms in warning though she knew they could not understand her words. "You must leave," she cried, her voice trembling with fear. "The soldiers are coming. You cannot stay here." The largest dragon, dark-scaled and wide-winged, lowered its head toward her. Its eyes glowed with fire, but there was no anger. Myra felt as though it could sense her fear. She pointed toward the colony and then back to them, shaking her head. She pressed her hands together, begging them to understand. The limping dragon stepped closer and released a low sound, not quite a growl, not quite a roar. The other dragons stirred, lifting their wings and tails. They seemed to understand that danger was near, but none of them moved to leave the valley. Their injuries kept them weak. Their bodies were not ready to fly. Myra's heart sank. She realized they could not escape even if they wanted to. The soldiers would arrive with weapons that burned and tore. These creatures who had shown her trust would be destroyed. She clenched her fists, her eyes filling with determination. If they could not run, then she would stand with them. The hours passed slowly. The sun rose higher, turning the dust into gold. The dragons shifted in unease, sensing something in the distance. Myra climbed to the ridge again, her eyes scanning the horizon. Far away, a cloud of red dust rose into the air. The soldiers were coming. Myra hurried back down to the dragons. She stood in the center of the valley, her small figure surrounded by massive bodies of red scales and wings. She tried to calm her breath, but her chest felt tight. She was only one girl with no weapon, yet she felt no desire to leave. The limping dragon pressed its head near her shoulder. Its breath was hot, its scales rough against her skin. Myra placed her hand gently on its jaw. She whispered, "I will not leave you. I promise." The sound of marching feet and clanging metal grew louder. From the ridge, Myra saw the first soldiers appear. They moved in lines, their weapons raised, their eyes fixed on the dragons below. Dust rolled behind them as more soldiers followed. The dragons shifted, their wings spreading slightly. Their eyes blazed brighter, but they did not attack. They seemed to wait, watching Myra. The soldiers stopped at the ridge, their leader raising his hand. "There they are," Raran called out, his voice sharp. "Prepare to fire." Myra's heart pounded. She stepped forward, placing herself between the soldiers and the dragons. She raised her arms wide, her voice shaking but strong. "Stop," she shouted. "You cannot harm them. They are not your enemies." The soldiers froze in surprise. Murmurs spread through the line. They had expected to fight dragons, not to see a young girl standing in front of them. Raran's face darkened with confusion and anger. "Myra," he said sharply. "Move away. These creatures are dangerous. You will be hurt." Myra shook her head. Her eyes burned with tears, but her voice was steady. "No. They are weak and wounded. They are not attacking. If you fire, you will not only destroy them. You will destroy trust. They let me live. They let me near. I will not let you kill them." For a long moment, silence filled the valley. The soldiers hesitated, their weapons still raised but their hands uncertain. The dragons did not roar or lash out. They stood behind Myra, wings folded, watching the humans. The choice hung heavy in the air. One girl against an army. One small act of courage standing before the storm of war. The danger had arrived, but the battle was not yet decided. Myra stood tall in the valley, her arms stretched wide, her small figure blocking the path between the soldiers and the wounded dragons. The red sun blazed above, throwing long shadows over the ground. Behind her, the dragons remained still, their wings folded close, their eyes glowing with quiet fire. In front of her, the soldiers stood ready, their weapons raised but their hearts uncertain. Raran, the leader, stepped forward. His voice carried across the dust. "Myra, you must move. These creatures cannot be trusted. They are killers. Step aside before it is too late." Myra's chest rose and fell quickly, but her voice did not break. "No. They are not killers. I have been with them. I gave them food. I cleaned their wounds. If they were the monsters you believe, I would not be standing here alive." The soldiers shifted uneasily. They had never seen anyone speak in defense of dragons, much less a child. Some lowered their weapons slightly, glancing at one another with doubt. Raran clenched his jaw. He raised his hand again, ready to give the order. Myra's heart thundered. She knew that if she stepped aside, the dragons would be lost. She also knew that standing her ground might cost her everything. Yet the choice had already been made in her heart. She would not move. She would be their shield. "I will not let you harm them," she declared, her voice rising over the silence. If you fire, you will have to fire through me. The words struck the soldiers like a stone dropped into still water. A wave of shock rippled through the line. Raran's eyes burned with anger, but he did not lower his hand. His voice grew harsher. Do not be foolish, Myra. These creatures will never be our friends. They are a danger to every person in this colony. Myra shook her head firmly. You are wrong. Look at them. They are not fighting. They are not attacking. They are only trying to live. I have seen their pain. I have felt their trust. Please, do not turn this valley into a place of death. Behind her, the limping dragon stepped forward. It lowered its head beside her, its glowing eyes fixed on the soldiers. Its breath washed over her like hot wind, but it did not roar. Instead, it pressed its head lightly against her side, as if to show that she was part of them. The soldiers gasped. Never before had they seen a dragon act in such a way. The creatures were known for fire and claws, not for calmness or trust. Some of the younger soldiers lowered their weapons completely, doubt filling their eyes. Raran growled in frustration. These beasts are tricking you, Myra. They pretend to be weak so we lower our guard. Do not be fooled. Myra turned her gaze toward him, her eyes burning with strength that surprised even herself. I am not fooled. I see them more clearly than you ever have. They are not beasts. They are living, breathing beings who feel hunger, pain, and fear just as we do. If you kill them today, you will not be saving the colony. You will be destroying a chance for something greater. Silence followed her words. Dust swirled gently across the valley floor. The dragon stayed still, waiting. The soldiers wavered, caught between the order of their leader and the courage of a girl. Raran's hand trembled in the air. He looked at Myra, standing unarmed before the dragons, her arms wide like a wall of flesh and bone. He looked at the pack behind her, not roaring, not charging, only watching. Doubt flickered in his stern eyes, but his pride forced him to stand firm. At last, one soldier stepped out of line. His weapon lowered to the ground. His voice was steady but quiet. Sir, she may be right. Look at them. They are not enemies right now. They are only wounded. Another soldier followed, lowering his weapon as well. Then another. Soon half the line had their guns pointed down, their eyes fixed not on the dragons but on Myra. Raran's jaw tightened as his command slipped away. Myra felt hope stir in her chest. Her shield was working, not because she was strong, but because she stood without fear. She turned slightly, looking at the dragons behind her. Their eyes glowed softer now, their wings relaxing. They seemed to understand that she had stopped the battle for this moment. But Myra knew the danger was not over. A single wrong move, a single spark of violence, could break the fragile balance. She raised her voice once more, steady and clear. Please, let us find another way. Do not fight. Do not kill. If you will not trust them, then trust me. The valley held its breath. The sun burned above, the soldiers stood divided, the dragons waited in silence. One girl stood between war and peace, her body a shield, her courage the only barrier stronger than any weapon. Whatever happened next would shape not only her fate, but the fate of humans and dragons together. Myra felt the weight of the valley pressing on her. The soldiers had paused, their weapons lowered but their eyes wary. Behind her, the red dragons shifted slightly, their bodies tense but calm. Myra's heart pounded with both fear and hope. She knew that what happened next could change everything. The limping dragon stepped closer to her. Its head pressed gently against her side, its glowing eyes looking into hers. Myra felt a sudden warmth spread through her body, as if the dragon was sharing something beyond words. She had never experienced anything like it before. The feeling was soft, gentle, but it carried a power she could not describe. Then it happened. The dragon blinked slowly, and a vision filled Myra's mind. She gasped and fell to her knees. She saw the dragon's world through their eyes. She saw forests of red and gold, rivers that sparkled under twin suns, and other dragons flying in harmony. She felt their joy, their playfulness, and then their fear. Humans had arrived in their world long ago. Many dragons had been killed. Their families scattered. The pack before her was all that remained of this lineage. She could feel their pain, their memories of loss, and their hope to survive. Myra's hands trembled as the vision faded. She looked up at the dragons, understanding them in a way she never had before. They were not monsters or threats. They were survivors. They had trusted her because they saw her heart. Her fear melted into determination. She turned to the soldiers, who watched her with confusion. "Do you see them?" Myra asked, her voice shaking but strong. "They are not enemies. They have suffered. They only want to live, like we do. If you attack them now, you will not be protecting the colony. You will be destroying something that could be our friends." Some soldiers whispered to one another, their brows furrowed. They had never thought about dragons this way. All their lives, they had been told dragons were dangerous and must be killed. Yet here was a girl, small and unarmed, speaking with a truth they could feel but could not yet understand. The largest dragon lifted its head higher. Myra saw something in its eyes that startled her. It was not anger. It was intelligence. It was wisdom. And it was decision. The dragon bent its neck slightly toward her, a gesture that felt like trust and understanding. Myra took a deep breath. She moved closer to the injured dragon, gently touching its wing. The creatures had allowed her into their world, and now she could share their story with the humans. "Please," she said, looking at the soldiers, "give them a chance. Stand down. Do not fight. We can find a way to live together. We can help each other." A younger soldier, no older than Myra herself, stepped forward. His hands shook as he lowered his weapon completely. I think she is right," he said. "We never saw their side. We only followed orders. Maybe we were wrong." Another soldier followed. Slowly, more soldiers lowered their weapons, their faces showing doubt and fear mixed with curiosity. Raran, their leader, stood frozen, his pride and anger warring with the sight before him. His soldiers were no longer ready to fire, and the dragons had not attacked. Myra felt a spark of hope. She moved slightly, keeping her hands visible, and spoke again. "I have been with them. I know their pain. They have trusted me. They can trust us too if we choose kindness over fear." The limping dragon pressed its head against her shoulder once more. Myra felt its steady pulse, its warmth, and something incredible stirred within her. She realized the dragons had opened a part of themselves to her that no one else had seen. They were offering her their world in exchange for protection and trust. The soldiers hesitated. Some glanced at one another, unsure what to do. Others lowered their eyes, as if they could not argue with the truth in Myra's words. Even Raran's face softened slightly, though he refused to speak. Pride held him back, but doubt had entered his mind. Myra felt the moment hang in the air. She had crossed fear and stood in the place where courage and trust met. She had shielded the dragons with her body, and now she had shared their story with humans who had never understood. The wind picked up, swirling dust across the valley. Myra looked at the pack, at the creatures who had allowed her to become part of their lives. She whispered softly, "We can do this together. You and I, and them." Then, slowly, the dragons moved closer to her, forming a circle around her, their heads lowered in a gesture of unity and trust. Myra felt a wave of connection, a bond that bridged the gap between species. This moment was more than courage. It was understanding. It was the beginning of something incredible. For the first time, humans and dragons shared the same ground without fear. For the first time, one girl's courage had created a chance for peace. The valley was silent except for the wind. Myra stood among the dragons, feeling their warmth and trust. The soldiers lowered their weapons completely, their hearts heavy with the realization that everything they had believed might be wrong. And in that silence, Myra knew that the turning point had come. What happened next would decide the future, not with violence, but with courage, trust, and understanding. The valley was quiet, almost holding its breath. Myra stood in the center, surrounded by the dragons who had trusted her. Their glowing eyes watched her every move, their massive bodies shifting slightly as if to protect her. The soldiers, now lowered their weapons, watched too, unsure what to do next. Myra felt a surge of hope. She knew this moment could change everything. She knelt beside the limping dragon. Its head rested lightly on her lap, and Myra ran her hands along its rough, warm scales. "I have to show them," she whispered, "I have to make them see what I see." Myra stood and turned to face the soldiers. Her eyes were bright, her voice calm but firm. "These dragons are not dangerous. They are hurt, yes, but they are not our enemies. They have families, feelings, and memories. They have suffered because of us in the past, yet they have trusted me. Can we not return that trust?" A few soldiers glanced at each other nervously. They had never considered the idea that dragons could be intelligent, feeling, or even able to form trust with humans. Some lowered their heads, ashamed. Others hesitated, their hands still on their weapons but trembling. The largest dragon stepped closer to Myra. Its head was almost as high as her shoulder, its wings folded neatly. Myra reached out and touched the dragon's smooth scales. Suddenly, she felt a warmth, a connection, as if the dragon were trying to communicate. She closed her eyes and focused. Images filled her mind once again. She saw the dragon's world in more detail than before. She saw forests painted in red and gold, rivers glittering like jewels, and countless dragons flying in harmony. Then she saw the humans arrive, their machines cutting through the forests, scaring the dragons, breaking apart their families. She felt the dragons' fear, their sorrow, and their longing for safety. Myra opened her eyes. She gasped at the clarity of the vision. She realized the dragons were not just creatures, they were survivors, carrying the memory of a lost world. They had trusted her because they knew she would not betray them. They had chosen her to be their voice. She turned back to the soldiers. "Do you see now?" she asked. "These dragons have been through pain, loss, and fear. They are not here to harm us. They only want to survive, just as we do. If we attack them, we are the ones causing destruction." Some soldiers lowered their weapons completely, their faces pale. Others still held theirs, but their hands shook. Roran stood rigid, his pride making it hard for him to speak. Yet even he could not deny the truth in Myra's words. He had seen the dragons stay calm, not attack, even when she had stood alone between them. Myra felt courage bloom within her. She stepped closer to the dragons. "We can work together. They can help us understand the land. They can show us safe paths, water, and food. We do not need to fight. We can choose peace." The limping dragon nudged her hand with its nose. Myra smiled. She understood its gesture, it was a sign of agreement. The pack behind her shifted, some nudging one another, as if acknowledging her words. Myra's heart filled with hope. Roran's voice broke the silence. "Myra, you have risked your life for them. I do not understand everything, but I see your courage. If we attack now, I fear we will lose more than we gain." The soldiers relaxed slightly, lowering their weapons to the ground. Some whispered to each other, discussing the possibility of living without fear. Myra nodded slowly, feeling a connection growing between humans and dragons. The dragons pressed closer to Myra, their massive bodies forming a circle around her. The sun reflected off their red scales, making them shine like living fire. Myra placed her hands on two dragons' heads, feeling their warmth and trust. "We can do this," she said softly. "Together." A gentle wind blew through the valley. The dust swirled around them, carrying the warmth of the sun. The dragons lifted their heads, breathing slowly and calmly, as if acknowledging that a new path had begun. Myra realized that this was more than just survival. It was the beginning of understanding between two very different worlds. Raran finally spoke again. "Myra, you have shown us a courage none of us could match. If these dragons can trust you, then maybe we can trust them too." Myra nodded. "We can. We must. They are not our enemies. They can help us, and we can help them." For the first time in the valley, humans and dragons stood together without fear. Myra's courage had bridged the gap between the two species. The pack looked at her with calm eyes, the soldiers looked at her with respect, and Myra knew that the path forward would be difficult but possible. The revelation had come. The dragons were not monsters. They were intelligent, feeling, and deserving of trust. And Myra had shown everyone that courage, kindness, and understanding could change the world. The valley no longer felt like a place of danger. It felt like the beginning of something incredible. The valley was calm now, unlike any day Myra had ever seen. The dragons rested behind her, their glowing eyes soft and watchful. The soldiers had lowered their weapons completely, their faces reflecting a mixture of awe and uncertainty. Myra stood in the middle, her small body no longer trembling with fear. She had faced danger and won not with strength, but with courage and understanding. The sun rose higher, painting the valley in gold and red. Myra looked at the dragons, the creatures she had once feared like everyone else in her colony. She remembered the first moment she had seen them, wounded and alone. Now they were calm, protected, and beginning to trust humans in a way no one thought possible. Raran, the leader of the soldiers, stepped forward slowly. "Myra," he said, his voice quiet but respectful, "what you have done here is more than bravery. You have shown us that courage is not just about fighting. It is about understanding, kindness, and trust. I think we have much to learn from them." Myra nodded. She had hoped someone would see it this way. They can teach us about the land, the skies, and each other. We can share knowledge, not fear. We can live together and protect each other. The dragons shifted closer, their wings brushing the ground, their tails curling around them. The limping dragon moved beside her, nudging her gently with its head. Myra reached down and rested her hands on its scales. She could feel the warmth, the steady pulse of life, and the trust that had grown between them over these days. Some of the soldiers stepped forward cautiously. One young man placed his hand on a dragon's back, feeling the scales and warmth beneath his fingers. He looked up at Myra with a smile. "They are incredible," he whispered. "I never thought a creature like this could exist so close to us and be so gentle." Myra smiled back. "They are not only gentle. They are wise, loyal, and brave. They need us as much as we need them." Raran nodded slowly. "Then we will find a way to live with them. We will protect them, and they will help us. This valley, this planet, can be a home for both of us if we choose wisely." Myra felt a wave of joy. For so long, the colony had been afraid of the dragons. Fear had kept them separated, isolated, and suspicious. Now, with a single act of courage and a promise of trust, a new path was opening for both species. The dragons moved gently, forming a protective circle around Myra and the soldiers. Their glowing eyes reflected intelligence and understanding. Myra realized that they had accepted the humans, just as the humans had started to accept them. It was a bond that could not be broken by fear or violence. She looked out at the valley. The wind swept across the red dust, carrying a fresh smell of life. The sunlight made the dragon's scales shine like molten fire. Myra imagined what it would be like if her colony and the dragons could work together. The dragons could guide humans to safe water, help them navigate the land, and even warn them of dangers. Humans could protect the dragons from harm and build a place where both could thrive. The idea filled Myra's heart with hope. She turned to the dragons and spoke softly. "We can start over. We can be friends, partners, and protectors of each other. We can make this world better, not through fear, but through trust and courage." The limping dragon nudged her shoulder again, a gesture of agreement. The largest dragon lifted its head high and released a low, calm roar. It was not a sound of anger, but a sound of acknowledgement, of acceptance. Myra felt the power of the moment. The dragons had recognized her as a friend, and now the humans were beginning to see them in the same light. Over the next few hours, Myra helped the soldiers understand the dragons' needs. She showed them where the injured dragons could rest safely, where the younger dragons could find food, and how to move carefully so that no one would be harmed. The soldiers listened, learning more in a few hours than they had in years of training. By evening, the valley had transformed. The dragons were relaxed, their bodies stretched across the red dust, their eyes soft and glowing. The soldiers lowered their weapons completely and stood among them, no longer afraid. Myra felt proud and grateful. She had done what no one else dared to do. She had bridged the gap between fear and understanding, between humans and dragons. As the sun set, painting the sky with streaks of gold and red, Myra stood beside the limping dragon. She looked at the soldiers, the dragons, and the valley. She realized that life here would never be the same again. Together, humans and dragons could face the challenges of the world, protect one another, and create a future full of trust and courage. Myra smiled, knowing her choice had made a difference. She had shielded the dragons with her life, and in return, she had witnessed something incredible. A bond had formed that would last, a new beginning had started, and the valley would never again know fear alone. The red dragons and the humans looked at each other in quiet understanding. And in that moment, the world felt full of possibility, full of hope, and full of life. Myra knew this was only the start of a new journey, a journey where courage, trust, and kindness would shape the future for both humans and dragons.